on, bro?
Hey, what's going on, Rufus?
Oh man, I'm over here trying to find my B6.
Your B6? Is that like your vitamin B? Is it like gummies? Chewables? B12?
Oh, you funny. You know what I'm talking about, my B6.
Your bees are sick? Man, I didn't even know you had a beehive.
Oh, bro, come on. You know exactly what I'm saying here, my epic B6. You know I be working out trying to get that beef, get the protein in here, get these muscles grow.
Oh, your beef sticks. Yeah, I haven't seen your B6.
Oh, yeah, well,
Hey, why are your arms sticking out so far?
that's because I've been working out so much, my lats got so big can't put my arms down.
Oh, yeah, looks great.
Hey, what's that you got there?
Oh, this? Yeah, this is a barrel. It's a prop. You remember that movie Jaws? It's like a big fish, big ocean. There's a boat, and they like shoot these barrels at the shark, and that's how they follow it and find it.
Ah, you don't say. Sounds useless. I do, however, remember this movie called Parks, and boy, I loved that movie when I was a kid. Had
I'm
this
gonna
chap
head
was
back into the
terror.
garage.
He learned how to play
I hope you
computers,
find your
program
B6,
things,
man.
and went on all these adventures with all his friends. And come to think of it, where is that movie? Boy, I would love to watch
Sorry,
it again.
Rufus. Boy, I love these things.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Factory of Fun. I'm Brady. It's time for another fun tutorial. This time we're going to be making one of these. For those of you that are Jaws fans, probably recognize this immediately. This is the iconic orca barrel from Jaws.
Time! What were you doing? You knew I had to...
And this one's a little special because just by staring at it, nobody would probably ever assume that there's actually a hidden container inside. So it uses this cool latching mechanism that's actually pretty satisfying. You can push it back together and then you twist it. Very satisfying, fun to play with, arguably also could double as a fidget toy. So we're gonna learn how to paint this. We're going to weather it. I'm gonna show you two different techniques to do the chipping and the scratching. Then we're gonna give it a little clear coat. We're gonna put a wash on it. We're gonna make our own wash. And then finally, we're gonna put some twine on it to give it that extra pop of accuracy. You could put it in your cupboard. You could hide your jelly beans in here, put your money in here. Nobody would ever know the difference. Just set it on your mantle in all its glory. So this is gonna be a lot of fun. Let's dive into it. Here we are inside of Fusion 360. I just wanted to take a few moments here just to show you a little bit about how this is constructed. I'm not going to go into depths as far as how to recreate something like this, but I just want to show you at a high level the thought process. So the way that this started was as I went out on the web and I found some reference images from the actual barrel from Jaws. I was able to find a little bit of an orthographic view, meaning one that's straight on, and I kind of was able to use that as my reference to make sure that I got the dimensions somewhat accurate. I did take some creative freedom and adjust a couple things to make sure that it was more printer friendly. For example, this recess and this rib, and as well as the ribs up here as we move up into the top, they don't have any harsh 45-degree angles. Even this kind of ledge where my cursor is right here doesn't as well. As you know or may not know, printers don't do really good with anything more extreme than 45-degree angles because you either have to create supports or it has to create bridges, and it generally impacts the quality of the print. So I tried to make this a pretty printer-friendly model. All right, this was built using components, and I'm going to talk a little bit about components in just a second. So if I grab these lids, they pull off. Those are going to be a separate print, and then the entire top of the canister removes itself to reveal, look at that, the hidden compartment within. So that's what's fun about this object is once you print it and we weather it and make it look basically prop accurate, it will look great sitting on your shelf and nobody would assume that it's actually a hidden storage container inside. So you could put your money in here, you could put some jelly beans in there, you could hide any number of things inside this, whatever your heart desires. So this is not going to be a full Fusion 360 tutorial, but I did want to just briefly show you some standard techniques that I tend to use when I go about building things inside of Fusion 360. The first thing that we would do is we would create a sketch, and Fusion is going to ask me what plane do I want to put it on. And now we're going to come back to this, but there is very many ways that we could go about creating that cylinder. The first way would be to just simply grab a circle and draw it out on our bottom plane. We'll just give this a rough 80 millimeter width. And once we have this blue shape on our canvas, we can then click it and hit the E key to extrude it, and we can extrude it up, let's say 80. Next, we need to give it some curvature. We could give it a chamfer. And we're going to grab the bottom here, and chamfer has a bunch of different options. If we do equal distance, an equal distance chamfer is going to equally chamfer the X and Y axis. But what would probably be a little bit more helpful in our case is do two distances so that we can adjust these independently. So maybe this one I want to be 15 and that one we want to be 20. Okay, and now we can put a fillet on top of that. So we can grab this right here and give it some rounding. And there we go. Now, this is not perfect, but you can tell we pretty much achieved what we wanted as far as having some rounding on the base here. Okay, what about creating the rib and then the recess? Well, what we could do is we could create a sketch on the side and then use a Boolean and sweep it around and kind of bite into the object, if you will. So if we go to our front and I click create new sketch, I'm going to temporarily hide the body just to make sure that Fusion doesn't think I'm trying to draw on a body. Okay. And I'm going to turn my body back on. Now what I need to do is I want to make sure that I can get this left line available to me in this new sketch that I'm in. And this is where projections come in really, really handy. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go project, and I'm going to move my cursor over that dot, and I'm going to move it over that dot. And you could even select this whole object if you wanted. And I'm just going to hit OK. Now, if I turn that body off, you'll see that we got these lines being projected from the initial body. And this is great because now we can reference a sketch that was created in a different plane. And if that sketch changes, this will update. Now, it's not always super reliable. I've noticed that sometimes these projections can break and you have to reset them. But nonetheless, let's continue on here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to snap this, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle all the way down. And now what we can do is I'm going to temporarily hide the body, okay? And I'm going to select my sketch. I need to say finish sketch. And now what we can do is we can do a revolve. The first thing we need to do is select the profile, which we've already selected. And now we need to select an axis. And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to select the blue axis. Nothing happened because my body is still hidden. And if I turn it back on and we choose cut and I say okay, there we go. So if we go back to our jaws mug, you can see that's basically what was done there. And now that we've created this side sketch, we could go in here and we could make some adjustments to it. So let's say I'm going to put another square in like right there, and I'm just going to say finish sketch. And now this is where Fusion is so great. It's parametric. We can go in our timeline and we can make a change here. So when I do this sweep, I want it to skip this little section. So I'm just going to click on it and say, okay. So look at that. Pretty quickly, we were able to achieve a pretty solid object here. And then what I did further was I just went in and I started adding some fillets. So I'm just going to select these, do some fillets like this. You can stack fillets. This is something that is really helpful. You don't have to use this fillet definition for other fillets you want to make. You can go over here into your fillet panel, hit the plus button. Now I'm going to grab that one. And what if I want that fillet to be a little bit more than the others? Maybe I'll do 1.2. And so what I did there is I actually have compounding fillets. So now the way that this works is, let's say that I wanted to add another fillet for the 1mm. I select it over in my panel, hold the Command or Control key, select another line, add it to it, Command click, add it to it, and there we go. Now this has got some extreme angles here. I can already tell this might not print the best, and we probably would want to add this one here just for completeness. And then the last piece that we would do is, if we wanted this to be hollow, we could create a shell. And we just hit the top and we hit shell and we move that in, and there you go. Now, if you didn't want, let me pause here for another opportunity to add another feature called section analysis, which is great. I've moved mine out of the inspect menu up into my toolbar as a shortcut, but if you go into inspect, section analysis, choose a plane, it will slice your object in half and let you see the interior. So when you have multi-piece constructions or assemblies, this really gets you a lot of visibility into the tolerances of how things are fitting together, so on and so forth. And you'll notice that when we did that shell, that it gave us this kind of interior contours, and we might not want that. So if you didn't want that, what you would do then is you would probably just create a sketch on the top, which we can do right now. So let's go back on our timeline. We're going to leave that for now because I'll show you what you can do. You could just leave that. And then if I click on the top surface, right click, create sketch, and I just hit the O key and I click on our edge of the top of this object, I can just offset that existing edge. So let's say I'm going to go in and maybe I want the thickness to be, I don't know, 5.7 for some reason or another. Great. Okay. We're now going to select that circle that we just created on the top, E to extrude, and let's move this down. And we can turn on our analysis here and we can see how close we're getting to our edge. So maybe that's about right. And then what we could do furthermore is we could chamfer it if we really wanted. Now keep in mind, if you're going to try and put like a bottle or something in here, you wouldn't want to chamfer this too much. So we could do something like that. So there we have it. So now that we've kind of like done a brief rundown on Fusion, and we've kind of got hopefully a better understanding of how you might go about creating something like this, there's one last piece to talk about, and that is components. This is a key piece when you're starting to become more proficient and more organized, and you want to start abstracting your parts and pieces so that they can be reusable. Okay, back in this file that we created, and notice what it's done here, because I still have my shell command, which actually we're just going to delete that shell command. We're gonna let's assume that we wanted to create the top. We're not going to go through the whole process of creating the top, but let's just assume that, you know, now we wanted to do that. If I was going to do this over again, I would make everything a component, and here's why. Once you create a component, that component can be duplicated, and it can either share, meaning it's like an instance of the original, so any change to the original will affect the instance, or I could create a new copy of this object and alter it however I might want while leaving the other one untouched. Furthermore, with assemblies, that is how you animate things in Fusion. They have to be components. Being that these are components, if I wanted to, I could animate this for some sort of, you know, information like engagement. I was trying to sell this and I like showed like, hey, these pieces come off and that comes off, and cool, you can store stuff in there. Wonderful. So let's do that real quick. Underneath the assemble menu in the top toolbar here, you see this called new component. So if we create new component, I'm just going to call this lid. And right now you'll see that we actually have a component to begin with. Fusion kind of starts out with a component. It's just not really named anything. It's your base level working environment, which actually itself is kind of treated as a component. So if I create a new component and I call it lid, you'll see that it's been added here. And now I can switch my little radio button between these, and look at the timeline at the bottom of the screen when I do that. When I go down to my lid, the lid is basically treated as an entirely new timeline. So this is really helpful when we start getting into organization. And we're going to use another trick here that we've already used before. So I want to start building my lid, but what I need for my lid is I need to borrow some of the information from our base. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to create a sketch. And now what I want to do is I want to create a sketch from the top. And notice I can still select the top part of the existing body, which was actually the bottom of this cylinder, but I was able to select it to initiate that as my starting point for my sketch. And then what I want to do is I want to leverage some of the existing lines, and it's already letting me do that. Sometimes you have to use project in order to reference them, and sometimes you don't. And I'm still learning, so I'm sure somebody who's an astute Fusion user will probably be able to explain why this is. But nonetheless, what we want to do is we want to take all of these shapes and I'm just going to extrude it up. And on the right, I want to make sure that this is new body, being this is a brand new component. There's going to be no problems with it automatically trying to join with the other one. But in Fusion in general, if you try and extrude a object that you want to be treated as separate and it shares some plane with another object, it's going to auto to join. So just keep that in mind. So we'll move this up and we'll just say, okay. And now let's create, let's say, the recess where this lid might fit into the body. This is where we need to start considering tolerances for 3D printers, and this is where our analysis comes in really helpful. All right, let's go to this sketch that it created for us. And, oh, sorry, it's upside down. And we can still see this edge that is part of the bottom. I'm gonna hit the O key. And I'm going to offset this minus 1.8. I'm sorry, 0.18. Now, depending on the scale and size of your objects, tolerances change. For smaller objects, your tolerances usually need to be higher. For bigger objects, they usually need to be less. So I'm just going to throw in a 0.18 tolerance here. And I'm going to say finish sketch. Okay, so now that we're back to our object view, we need to make sure that that sketch is turned on. Fusion has a habit of turning off sketches. Just be aware of that. And now if we zoom in here and we grab the bottom and we hit E to extrude, we're just going to pull this down. And if we zoom in, you can see, hey, look, there's the tolerance, there's the gap that we left so that we can apply any of our 3D printer tolerances that we know into our objects so that these pieces will fit together. Now, if I go back up and I select the radio button for our main world, I can now grab this object. Oh, here, you know what? I need to unground. I can move it around. I'm not sure why the, I'm not sure why it's doing what it's, oh, I'm sorry. It's because I have analysis on. I was like, what in the world's going on here? Okay, so now I can just grab this object and I can move it around. And if I wanted to animate it, I could animate it. And then if I wanted to make a copy, let's say for some reason I wanted to make a copy because maybe I was going to mess with one. So I'm going to go down here and say copy, make sure that the main component is selected. Otherwise, it will duplicate it within itself. And I can go here and say paste or paste new. Let's go ahead and say paste. And I'm going to show you what will happen here. I'm going to move that over to the side. We'll hit OK. Now I'm going to go back here, and for some reason or another, I decide, you know what, I want to make some changes. I want to chamfer this. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to chamfer the roof, and we'll chamfer this as well, and we'll hit OK. And we'll go back to main world, and look at that. It did it to both of them. That's because when I created this additional component, and I went up here and I said paste instead of paste new. If you do paste new, that's going to create basically a copy, but it is now disconnected from the master, if you will. So hopefully this was helpful, and maybe it gets your brain thinking around, you know, creating assemblies and how they can really help when you start using components. It's pretty much a standard practice for me now that whenever I start building anything in Fusion, I always start with components first because it gives me the flexibility of copying, pasting, cloning. You can even share these components in other files as well. So it's really, really powerful. All right, let's get this over into Bambu Studio. The quickest way I have found to get multi-component objects over into Bambu Studio is to go over to the Utilities tab in Fusion 360 and hit the Make button, and then just select in your browser over here the topmost component, which in this case is JAWS Gulp. Then on the right, you can pre-select a slicer utility so that it will just automatically open that slicer utility and send it right to it, which I've already got Bambu Studio selected. I'm just going to hit OK. And look at that. Here we are in Bambu Studio. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the object and I'm going to say split into objects. Okay. And if I click off and then click back on, you'll notice there we go. It's given us our various bits and pieces. I'm going to create a new plate and I'm going to move both the top and the base onto one plate, and I'm going to keep the caps on its own. All right, I need to go up to device X1 carbon is what I'm going to be using for this, and then I'm going to go back to prepare. I'm going to hit the sync button to make sure that I resync my filaments, and then what I'm going to be using is black Bambu PLA matte for all of this. So I'm going to make sure that I get all of that selected. Let's get these arranged. And there's really going to be nothing special here for the slicing. If I just slice this plate, I'm going to be using, oh, you know what I just realized? I got to change this. I'm going to use 0.2 millimeter, but I have this pre-selected for my A1. We're going to go to Bambu X1 carbon, 2 millimeter standard, slice plate. Give it a quick preview. One thing that I will note here, and you will notice this in your print, this is common with 3D printing when you're creating bowls or containers where you have an inner layer here that is needing to be printed at the same time as an exterior layer. What happens is the printer is actually hanging out for a longer period of time on this layer. If we go over here to layer time and we scrub this up, you'll notice we get these bands right here. And it's because it's spending an additional amount of time on this layer. One way to solve this, weirdly, is if you have 100% infill, you will not get a line on the outside. Other than that, the only way I have found to mitigate this is by giving a chamfer or a fillet to the interior, which you can see we've done here, and that will minimize it, but it's not going to completely remove it. So when this does get printed, there usually is a little bit of a line here on the exterior, and it's not bad. We can just sand it off. It's really minor, but I just wanted to point that out. Another bit you can go to here that's kind of interesting is speed, where you can see how long it's taking on certain layers. So this can help debug if you're having issues with your print. Cool, here we are out in the garage, and one of the first things I noticed was the seam ran right down the front of my barrel. When I sliced this plate, the seam is running right down the front, and I didn't even pay close enough attention to notice that that's what was going on. The lid, the seams in proper places, like you don't really notice it, and this is generally what a slicer will try to do, is when it's in what's called aligned mode, which is by default it's going to try and do its best to put the seams in areas that are not super obvious, but on the bottom it put it right down the front. So what I should have done is in my slicer, and now specifically in Bambu Slicer, what I would do is I would switch from the global to the objects tab, because we don't want to affect the top, we just want to affect the bottom. Go to the quality sub tab down here, change aligned to back, slice it again, and then the seam should be on the back. There we go. All right, we got our barrel, we got our two caps. Let's get some toothpaste to do some masking. Okay, this is method one of the two methods we're going to talk about for creating some weathering and destruction on our barrel. We're going to use toothpaste to act as a mask. So we're going to go around and we're going to glob this on fairly heavy. The heavier the better, because then it's going to be easier for you to rub it off with your finger. And what's going to happen is after we spray this, we're going to rub it with our finger and it will reveal this black base that's underneath the yellow paint. Any toothpaste will work. I just happen to have this Sensodyne on hand. to throw down some paint. I've got some Rust-Oleum 2K Golden Sunset here, and I'm gonna mix it up in my drill, and then I'm gonna walk over here and do some spraying in front of my poor man's ventilation system. All right, I did about 3 coats. Don't worry about it being super even because it actually adds to the weathering effect. Back at the workbench, you can see here the blobs from the toothpaste, and now comes the fun part. Just gonna go around, just gonna start rubbing away, and you'll notice that it will remove the paint really easily. We're gonna walk over and give our barrel a little bit of a rinse to get the rest of the toothpaste off and rub away any extra hanging pieces of paint. All right, some more fun weathering. In this one, we're gonna be adding paint, whereas in the first method, we were removing it. So I've just cut off some pieces of a sponge that was just a kitchen sponge, and then I've got some black acrylic paint here from Golden Acrylics, and I've got my wet palette. A wet palette is great because it keeps your paint moist for a really long period of time. Gonna load up the sponge here with some paint and take some creative freedom here to just imagine how this barrel might have gotten a little messed up. What did it collide with? Like what areas of it would have had the paint worn off if it was like flipped over or fell on its side or stuff rubbing on the top of it. This I find to be a lot more fun and a little bit more therapeutic than the toothpaste method. So I'm just gonna continue going around here and create some more damage to our barrel. You'll notice that I'm using 2 different techniques, kind of a press, and then I'm also using a smudge, and that will help the variance in the effects. And the final touch, I'm gonna use a stencil brush, and these tend to have very frayed tips and they're flat, to add an additional level of detail to some of the scratches. This really is where it can pop the damaging effects and really sell where there's scratches on the barrel, and you can see it coming to life as I'm starting to do it. And it's just a matter of getting a little bit of paint on the brush, not a whole lot, and swiping it. And you'll start to get this really realistic looking scratch and bleed effect. I'm also going to use this same brush on the bottom portion of the barrel as well to give some more layering of the damage that would happen here, adding some scratches, adding a little bit more wear, and then going around and kind of just grunging up where the seams would be. What I'm doing here is I'm adding some additional black paint to the bottom edge of the lid, and I'm also adding it to the top edge of the bottom barrel so that when it's screwed together, you almost don't notice that there's a seam there because it looks like it's just grunge buildup. Last bit is the caps. We can't forget these. And I'm just going to lightly dry brush, which means I've got a very little bit amount of paint on my brush and I'm just kind of scraping it across the surface, trying to catch only the high areas to make it look like the cap was a little bit worn. Time to give this thing a bath. You're gonna need a spray bottle, brown ink, black ink, and acrylic medium. I'm using FW acrylic inks, but any will work. You also for sure will need this acrylic medium, or you can use dish soap. Both act as a flow aid to help the ink spread. So what this magic potion consists of is about 12 to 13 drops of black ink, Then I'm going to add about 3 to 4 drops of the brown to warm up the dark black a bit. Then I'll loosely drop in about 25 to 30 drops of the acrylic medium, and then lastly, we'll fill it up almost all the way with water, but leave some room so that we can shake it. Just gonna do a little test here on the cardboard paper I've got, and you can already see how nicely the ink is running and spreading. That's exactly what we want. Now I'm just gonna start spraying our bottle with the wash. I'm gonna use different heights and different distances just to try and get a lot of variance. I will note that through the power of contact adhesive or super glue, I attached the barrel caps. Now, in most cases with washes, you don't just spray it and leave it. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to lightly dab. I'm not wiping, but I'm going to dab to remove some of the wash. And sometimes this is a repetitive process where you'll spray, you'll remove some, you'll spray a little more and remove some until you get what you like. Our barrel's looking great. In this optional step, I'm just going to throw a quick layer of clear coat on it. Our final touch is we're going to add some realistic looking rope around the barrel and crisscross it over the top to make it look oh so movie prop accurate. Just going to establish some loose measurements here and then cut a couple pieces. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 2 pieces here. One I'm going to leave thick to wrap around the barrel, and then the other piece that I'm going to use, I'm going to peel apart so that the top crisscrossing pieces are a little bit thinner than the main twine. All right, now I'm just going to use the glue gun to tack into place the larger piece of string. I'm going to hold it here with my thumb for a moment, and then I'm going to start tying on the smaller pieces, creating little knots as we go around. Now I've got 2 of the strands tied on, and I'm going to tack the front to provide some tension and security, and then I'm going to weave underneath this the other 2 small pieces, and then finally we'll connect the string on the back side where we tacked down the start piece, and we're going to glue it right around the same place. Just going to trim off some excess, and cutting at a really extreme angle here can help blend the rope together. Now I just need to secure the other 2 ends of the smaller twine going across the top. To make sure that these knots don't come undone, I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue onto each one of them. The final piece of detail, and this might get overlooked, is the top of the barrel has a circular piece of rope, and in the movie this is how they were attaching them to the harpoons and attaching them to one another. So I'm just going to tie a little loop here at the top and use my finger as a guide. Last but not least, I'm going to attempt the very risky blowtorch routine and try to burn off some of the excess little strings and give the rope a little bit of a burnt effect. Realistically, you probably shouldn't do this when it's on the model because PLA can melt and you can also ruin your finish, but I was pretty careful and it came out all right. I'd like to dedicate this video to a really special human that was taken from this earth too soon. You'll be missed, my friend. Thank you so much for watching, and with that, we're gonna call this done.